I'm very excited to have Marie Howe with us here tonight on the Luminaries series. Uh, I just feel, Marie, that your poetry has so much grace and so much light in it. And it's interesting because when COVID started, we all moved to Zoom and we started a morning sitting program called Open Temple. And what we do is, we have a koan practice, which you're probably familiar with when we introduce a koan. But on top of that, each of the leaders who change every day could introduce a poem of their choice. And your poems were popping up all the time, and you became one of the favorite poets of our spontaneous series. And
Mm,
so I really wanted to talk to you more about that and talk to you more about your connections to Zen and Buddhism and more importantly to life. Your poetry's just got this beautiful light to it, I think. So could we start off perhaps with a poem?
Yeah. Um, John, if you don't mind, before then, I'd just like to say hello to everyone. It's so good to see you all. Really great to see you. It's just beautiful, beautiful faces. I'm just going through, some people are just your names are here, but it would be great to see your faces if you want to show your face. It's just always so good to see people. Um,
I also wanted to add that Allison Atwill and John Tarrant, the director of Pacific Zen, is here and will be coming in with comments and questions a little bit later.
yeah. Until more people are coming in the waiting room. You got that though, John, don't you?
Oh yeah, we're fine.
Oh, you got some. It's just so, it's great to see everybody. Very moving for me to see you all. It's a summer night here I'm outside New York. I'm 2 hours up in the Hudson River Valley. It's very hot here today. And it's a beautiful summer night that is now dark. I'm looking out through this window into the dark, and the house has become infested with big, large black flies. I just want to give you the context in which we're all talking. Um, I'm looking at a lot of flies crawling up the window. So this is a book. It's a new and selected poems, and I write slowly. I write a book about every 10 years, 9 or 10 years, and so to go through and sort of try and select poems to put in as selected poems was daunting and emotional. A lot of my friends helped me. I'm going to read this first poem in this section of just the very new poems, and it's called Prologue. In the middle of my life, just past the middle, walking along the street with our little dog Jack on a leash. Okay, just past the late middle, and what some might call early old age, on a street crowded with children and tourists. My father dead, my mother dead, my young husband gone from me and grown older, a father, a husband now to someone else. Jason dead, John dead, Jane and Stanley and Lucy and Billy and Tony, and now Richard dead. I came to the edge, and I did not know the way.
I love that because in that poem and in several poems in your new collection, just this strong sense of not knowing the way of not knowing uh, and it's
Yeah,
really beautiful how that comes. Can you speak to that a little bit?
yeah, I just did. I mean, that's it. I'm sure many of you here know what I'm talking about. We come to these moments where we sort of look around and we see who's here, who's not here, what's happened, what hasn't happened. Now, not everybody here is as old as I am, but it's I really did not know the way. I don't know. I still don't know. I don't know how to proceed right now. I'm sure I'm not alone in that either. The world is so confused. And so the only place I seem to be able to live is in the present, and hopefully doing one thing at a time instead of 5 or 4 or even 3. And so this was just the true beginning. And I just needed people to know that. Now, it's followed weirdly immediately by a poem called Postscript. So a prologue is followed by postscript. And maybe I could read that.
Please.
What we did to the earth, we did to our daughters, one after the other. What we did to the trees, we did to our elders, stacked in their wheelchairs by the lunchroom door. What we did to our daughters, we did to our sons, calling out for their mothers. What we did to the trees, what we did to the earth, we did to our sons, to our daughters. What we did to the cow, to the pig, to the lamb, we did to the earth, butchered and milked it. Few of us knew what the bird calls meant or what the fires were saying. We took of earth and took and took, and the earth seemed not to mind until one of our daughters shouted. It was right in front of you, right in front of your eyes, and you didn't see. The air turned red. The ocean grew teeth. For the last 10 years or so, I've been teaching. I say teaching. I always have to correct this. I have been practicing learning eco-poetry with my students, which is a poetry that tries to take in the living world. And by that, I mean everything. And moving the human a little bit off center. And lyric poetry is the human song. You know, we've been making poetry since we were rocking our babies, you know, by the fire. But I've become more and more interested in not completely. There's still autobiographical poems in here, but very interested in you know, in the larger vision of the world, as many of us are. I'm trying to think of like during the pandemic, you know, I was just trying to listen to what the earth had to say to us. You know, I was living in New York City at the time, and it was silent. That hum that is always part of New York's life stopped. And we heard bird song and sirens. That was most, I'm sure it was like that other places, but it was extraordinary actually to wake up in the morning. I have a dog, so I'd walk him outside and be nobody there, just bird song and then sirens and birds. And it was so anyway, there's one of the new poems is called What the Earth Seemed to Say, 2020. What the earth seemed to say. Do you still believe in borders? Birds soar over your maps and walls and always have. You might have watched how the smoke from your own fires traveled on wind you couldn't see, wafting over the valley and up and over the hills and over the next valley and the next hill. Did you not hear the animals howl and sing? Or hear the silence of the animals no longer howling? Now you know what it is to be afraid. You think this is a dream. It is not a dream. You think this is a theoretical question. What do you love more than what you imagine is your singular life? The water grows clearer, the swans, the swans settle and float there. Are you willing to take your place in the forest again? To become loam and bark, to be a leaf falling from a great height, to be the worm who eats the leaf and the bird who eats the worm. Look at the sky. Are you willing to be the sky again? You think this lesson is too hard for you. You want the time out to end. You want to go to the movies as before, to sit and eat with your friends. It can end now, but not in the way you imagine. You know, the mind that has been talking to you for so long, the mind that can explain everything. Don't listen. You were once a citizen of the country called I Don't Know. Remember the boat that brought you there? It was your body. Climb in.
I love that because it just encompasses so much. You once were a citizen of the world called I Don't Know, and this embodiment, climb in this boat that is your body. And it really sort of reminds me of the weaving and interweaving and interdependence, and that you're realizing in your poetry. I think more and more that's a word that comes up. And another, sorry?
Sure. Yeah, I'm saying
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah. And another word that comes up is unsayable. And I just pulled out the Tao Te Ching, and in your interviews, you pepper your discussion a lot with the unsayable. And of course, Tao Te Ching is the word that can be said is not the true word, right? Um, what is unsayable for you?
Just about everything. I mean, what's happening now here? Who can say it? I mean, who among us can say what's happening here? Um, every single one of us is perceived. I look at a screen, I see all your beautiful faces. Um, who's to know what's really happening? I love poems because poems can hold what can't be said. Poems can't be paraphrased. Um, Wonderful, kind people say, "What are your poems about?" And I want to know how to answer them kindly to say, it's not what they're about, you know. It's what happens as they happen to me, and then if it happens, Robert Frost says, no discovery for the writer, no discovery for the reader, no tears for the writer, no tears for the reader. But it feels as if what poetry is one of the last places that can't be summarized or paraphrased, that it can hold something in its center. Not always, of course, but I mean, sometimes that just refuses to be. It cannot be said. It can't be reduced to what you can. And we love to reduce things in this culture to what you can say. And then we want to rank it, you know, Marlon Brando's best movies, or whatever. It's just awful. So it seems that that's one of the great things about poetry. That, and also that it's not a commodity, because you don't make any money from it.
You were referring earlier to the sacred quality of poetry, where poetry is originally the sort of the spiritual language of humans developed, right? Um,
Yeah, but I think the first poem was probably a woman singing a lullaby to her baby.
mm,
I mean, to soothe the child and make them feel safe and at home. I mean, so is a lullaby come before the sacred song? Maybe. I don't know. I mean, or is that a sacred song? I mean, it feels as if these things are very connected, but we have been singing our songs, all kinds of songs from the very beginning when we could sing or speak.
mm. You come back to the word silence too quite a bit. Um, but silence is sort of a dynamic quality for you, and maybe even part of the creative process for you when you sit down and write a poem?
I don't even feel like I write the poems truly, John. I mean, but I thought that's another great thing about poetry is that it constantly encounters silence, like music, right? Music begins with silence. We have so little silence in the world. I was walking, I was doing errands today, and I was in Petco, and I was in the hardware store, and I was in the coffee place, and I was in the grocery store. And always in the background is kind of soft rock music, When did that begin? When did we begin to fill in the silence in life, in American culture? Do you remember? I think it began in the 60s. You guys remember that there was like you used to walk through a grocery store and there was just that was it before they began playing music in the background. Um, you just walked in the world, and the world made its music, but we didn't pipe in, this pop songs into every space. Um, so anyway, I noticed it today. So yeah, I think silence is our natural habitat. I mean, I think with the sounds of the other animals and the trees and the water and everything else, but we hardly ever get to hear that anymore.
Yeah. When now that we're on new poems, while we have uh, that, can you read The Singularity, and then I'd love to talk to you about that creative process that
Well,
you've.
do some of you maybe tell me, like, give me a wave if you read Maria Popova's, it used to be called Brain Pickings, a lot of people, yeah. It's now called The Marginalian, yeah. And those of you, does anybody here not know about Maria Popova's work? Maria sort of curates this kind of, yeah, how do we say it? She curates this kind of, I guess it's a blog. Oh, that's an awful word, but a kind of newsletter you can sign up for and get. It doesn't cost you anything. And she quotes, it's all about interconnection and between science and art and literature and life. And so she'll have, Rachel Carson and Silent Spring relating to an astronomer, relating to D.H. Lawrence, relating to, Naomi Shihab Nye, and everything is all connected. So Maria presents this astonishing event every year called The Universe in Verse. And she is a science a lover, doesn't even begin to touch what Maria is in relationship to science. She has the kind of photographic memory. She knows and remembers everything. And so she has poets and people just reading poems that somehow speak to or incorporate scientific ideas. It was right around this time that I was trying to read a lot of books so I could try to begin to approach understanding of where we live. So I'm trying to understand the cosmos, trying to understand physics. Neil deGrasse Tyson has a book called Astrophysics for People in a Hurry. I was reading that, and trying to read the Hawking's book. And I was really trying to take in the fact that a lot of these really, brilliant people believe in the Big Bang, that when we saw through the Hubble telescope the galaxies moving away, it's a really viable idea that everything began with this tiny, infinitesimal matter that blew up into everything that is. And that's called the singularity. Interestingly enough, you probably, and some of you know this way before I did, but the techies are now using the word singularity. Do you all know about this? I wish we could talk more together, but that the original singularity was that original extremely dense, minute something that blew up. But the singularity that the tech people talk about, and probably some of you are the tech people, and you can correct me, is that when all the computers connect and become one mind, that's the next singularity. So anyway, I was trying to, Maria said, write something. And I said, I can't. And then I got thinking about the singularity. And so and this poem ended up coming out, and it's after Stephen Hawking. He had just died weeks before. The singularity. And there's some Walt Whitman in here, some of you may recognize. And Walt Whitman, of course, knew more about the cosmos than most of us. He just knew it intuitively. Do you sometimes want to wake up to the singularity we once were? So compact. Nobody needed a bed or food or money. Nobody hiding in the school bathroom or home alone, pulling open the drawer where the pills are kept. For every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. Remember, there was no nature, no them, no tests to determine if the elephant grieves her calf or if the coral reef feels pain. Trashed oceans don't speak English or Farsi or French. Would that we could wake up to what we were when we were ocean. And before that, to when sky was earth and animal was energy and rock was liquid and stars were space and space was not at all, nothing. Before we came to believe humans were so important, before this awful loneliness. Can molecules recall it, what once was before anything happened? No I, no we, no one, no was, no verb, no noun, only a tiny, tiny, tiny brimming with is. All, everything, home.
I love that. Yeah. All, everything, home. You had chosen a different word from home originally, and then you changed it to home, I think, didn't you? Or what was the evolution of the poem, or towards the end?
It was a different ending, I can't remember, and there was a whole swath in the middle that got taken out. I have a daughter she's 24 now, but she was probably 20 then. She's really good listener and good reader. And I walked into, I would say her room, but we live in the tiniest apartment in New York. We live in essentially a long hall. And so I walked to the other end of the hall and said, "Can you listen to this?" And she said, "Yes." And I read it to her and she said, "Yes, it can work, but the whole middle part has to go from here." And she said the word to here. She said the word. And I went, right. So no one does anything alone in this world. So she was right about that. I don't remember what it was, John. I think that in Adam's book, which you saw, right? Adam Moss's,
Yeah.
my friend Adam Moss has written this amazing book called The Work of Art. And he interviewed 45 people about how they make something from nothing. And I can't recommend it more highly. It's such a good read. He talked to Twala Tharp. He talked to Stephen Sondheim. He talked to, hipper young musicians. I don't know their names. He talked to novelists. He talked to sculptors. He talked to all kinds of people and playwrights. And Lori Parks, a lot of people don't know what they're doing when they're creating, as we say. We use the word creation. I don't use that word. But I think many people don't know what's happening. They're just following something. At least it seems that way from reading Adam's book.
Mm.
But he had the earlier draft in it, and I don't remember it anymore.
Mm-hmm. The act of creation, you know, you've said some beautiful things which you've just repeated a little bit. Let me read just a little bit. I truly do not write the poem. Whatever moves through me is what's trying to speak. When I'm listening, I have an experience. The joy of writing is losing oneself, forgetting oneself, loss of self, fear of feeling connection. Enter into the subjectivity of someone else. The beautiful sense of forces, you know, moving through us beyond our, partly beyond our control and beyond our limited size. You know, maybe something grander here is happening. And it seems like singularity kind of brought that out, you know, this vastness.
Well, probably many of us here and right here and now has had this experience. When you lose yourself in something, it feels so good, right? When you forget yourself. You could be teaching, you could be cooking, you could be composing music, you could be listening to a child. But when you forget yourself, there's nothing sweeter in many ways, and I think that many of the people, and Adam talked to, are so surprised because many of them talk about this. It sounds kind of corny when I overhear it. It's like, did I say that? But it's because it's not really mysterious. It's just true. I don't think I have much to say. I feel like the poem has something to say to me.
Mm.
I don't feel like I have anything to say. We use the stuff in our life to burn it, if you will, to use it to make the poem, but it's you use it as to make it, but it's not the point.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like I feel
Yeah.
like even the more autobiographical poems, and we're joking about the book, What the Living Do. There's a lot of stories in there about my brother Johnny, who died, as many people did, in the 80s and 90s of the AIDS virus. But the even though they're seemingly personal, they're really, it's just feel like the poem she's using that to say something that I didn't really know.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, what the living do. So, uh, Johnny died in '89. He was 11 years younger than you, I guess. But you came from a big Irish Catholic family, nine people. But you were, even though this very big gap, you were very, very close.
Yeah. Well, John was adorable. Everybody loved John. He was one of those charismatic, shiny people. He also struggled a lot with addiction and alcoholism, as did many people in my family. But he was just had a light from the very, very, as soon as he was born. We were he used to say we were intimates from his cradle. But a lot of my sisters and brothers were close to John. I don't mean to be exclusive in any way, but he and I loved to write stuff together. And I would write Christmas plays that my family had to be in, and they hated them. They were dumb. He would come up and sit next to me when I was writing them, and he'd help me. Um, and so then later on, when I was 30, 33, 35, and he was 20 something, I would always call him if I thought maybe I had a poem. If I got it as far as I could possibly get it, I would call him and read it to him. And if he was moved by it, then it stayed. But often he wouldn't be. I mean, it's so hard to find someone to tell you the truth. And he would just say, didn't happen that time, Marie. And I would say, what do you mean? And he'd say, well, you know this already. Everything you wrote, you already know it.
Yeah. A couple of things. I'd love to read some of poems related to Johnny, but there's a lot of death in your poetry. And I guess some people have said that came about when Johnny passed, and you had a hard time getting back to writing poetry. And I don't mean death in a morbid sense, but death, there's kind of this quality of death highlighting life, where death around when you're on the grave, Johnny's grave, and doing snow angels. And
Yeah.
it really is not so much about death as living, and death being a part of life, I guess. But could we read the gate and then
Yeah,
maybe talk about that?
well, I think all art knows that we're living and dying at the same time. I mean, and we know we're living and dying at the same time. I don't know that my dog Jack knows this. Jack knows a lot of things. I mean, but I don't know that he walks around thinking, I'm alive and I'm going to die. But we humans know this, and we make art, we make things that can hold that understanding. A lot of my friends have died. And even before John, the gate, I had no idea that the gate I would step through to finally enter this world would be the space my brother's body made. He was a little taller than me, a young man, but grown himself by then, done at 28, having folded every sheet, rinsed every glass he would ever rinse under the cold and running water. This is what you have been waiting for, he used to say to me. And I would say, what? And he would say, this, holding up my cheese and mustard sandwich. And I would say, what? And he would say, this, sort of looking around.
That's great. And I hope you don't mind if you read a couple more. I mean, on Johnny, is that okay?
I love reading and talking about John. I mean,
Yeah.
it's great.
The last time.
Oh, the last time. Yeah. The last time is a little poem, everybody. It's very short. The last time. The last time we had dinner together in a restaurant with white tablecloths. He leaned forward and took my two hands in his and said, I'm going to die soon. I want you to know that. And I said, I think I do know. And he said, what surprises me is that you don't. And I said, I do. And he said, what? And I said, know that you're going to die. And he said, no, I mean, know that you are. But I think, a lot of people living with the AIDS virus were astonished to look at people and say, they don't even know. I mean, John really was a kind of spiritual teacher to me, no question. But he couldn't get over it. He's like, look at all these people in this restaurant. They really don't think they're going to die. Anyway, I shouldn't have added that.
No, no, that's great. That's great.
But yeah, I mean, isn't that the whole Zen thing, guys? Come on. My friend Shodo, does anybody here know Shodo and Koshin? They're monks in New York. They have a compassionate, you do? Yay.
No, of them, yeah.
They have a compassionate care, what's it called? People trained to become hospice workers. They're wonderful. And Shodo is hilarious. And he often ends a sit with, you are going to die. Shouts it. Like, okay, let's go get ice cream then. Let's have some chocolate ice cream. What are we waiting for?
It's great. And then how about the grave?
Yeah, my brother Andy.
Yeah.
So
Who's younger than John even, right?
yeah, he was 4 years younger than John. So again, I come from a big family. There were 9 of us, and people were, by that time, my older brother had a child, people. So the grave. That first summer, I lay on the grass above it, as if it were a narrow bed, just my size. Lying on the ground above my brother's body, like a log floating on lake water above its own shadow. During the first winter, I drove there one afternoon after Tom and Andy and Beth and Dor and Behia had been there. When I stepped out of the car, their footprints marked the snowy lawn, the men's big boots, the women's smaller ones, and Behia's little boot prints, as big as my hand, looping and falling down into a snow angel next to his grave, then another messy angel on it, and a grave or two away, another one, and the little blotch where she got up and brushed herself off. For some crazy reason, I was wearing high-heeled shoes in the snow. And walking back to the car, they made ovals and dots, fat exclamation marks, walking inside the steps of my brothers and sisters. One November, years later, I went there with Andy, who was by then as old as John was when he died. As we lay on the frozen ground, me using my scarf as a pillow on John's grave, and Andy on top of our father's grave, one grave away. And we talked like that for a little while, companionably, like an old couple talking in bed, our eyes closed against the sunlight. And when I cried, Andy didn't seem to wish me to stop. And that was a kind of happiness, lying there with my living brother, talking about our family. The ground was cold. Eventually, the chill crept through our coats and jeans, and we scuffled up. Andy reached down to give me his hand. And then it was over. We walked together back to the car and away from them. I haven't read that in a long, long time.
What does that feel for you?
Feels good. It was a happy day in many ways to be there with Andy. Lying there, talking with our eyes closed against the sun, lying on the graves. Felt good. So.
Yeah, nice. Nice. Thank you. Family, you said a lot of violence, a lot of alcoholism, but I'm just struck, and this is a little bit, I came from a very large Catholic family as well, but just by the closeness that you had with your siblings. Our house was a disaster all the time. My sister's on the call, and I don't know if she would agree, but my mother was working, my father was working, he was, all that, and we were just so close and did everything together. We're still probably our best friends, but there's a really great poem about that.
Oh, I know what you're thinking about. You're thinking about the game.
The game, correct. And on certain nights, maybe once or twice a year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And on certain nights, the game. And on certain nights, maybe once or twice a year, I'd carry the baby down, and all the kids would come, all 9 of us together. And we'd build a town in the basement from boxes and blankets and overturned chairs. And some lived under the pool table, or in the bathroom, or the boiler room, or in the toy cupboard under the stairs. And you could be a man or a woman, a husband or a wife or a child, and we bustled around like a day in the village until one of us turned off the lights switch by switch, and slowly it became night and the people slept. Our parents were upstairs with company or not fighting, and one of us, it was usually a boy, became the town crier, and he walked around our little sleeping population and told the hours with his voice, and this was the game. 9 o'clock, and all is well, he'd say, walking like a constable we must have seen in a movie, and what we called an hour passed. 10 o'clock, and all is well. And maybe somebody stirred in her sleep, or a grown-up baby cried and was comforted. 11 o'clock, and all is well. 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. And it went on like that through the night we made up until we could pretend it was morning. What I loved about that game, and a lot of what The Living Do, the first section, is really about gender and the fluidity of gender, and how that was a game you could be a man, a woman, a father, a child. You could be, and that there was a sense of, I like that part. I like that part of the game. That you pretend to be anybody in the town,
That's great. All is well. 1 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, all is well. You have the poem Sixth Grade. I don't know if you want to read it, but when I read it, I found it so disturbing, and so, it held, obviously as children, the sort of Lord of the Flies sort of thing where bully kids, pick on other kids, but there's also a girl-boy thing going on there.
Definitely, absolutely. I mean, this was like middle to upper middle class suburbs, and we were terrorized by boys. I mean, they would chase us on their bikes and just, throw us down on the ground. They were just crazy. It was crazy. But there was nobody watching. These were the days when, come home and the streetlights come on. Remember? I mean, so. Sixth grade. This whole section really is trying to just speak to some of the boys, and we were all they were all nice kids. I mean, but everybody's well. Anyway, I should stop talking. Sorry. Sixth grade. The afternoon, the neighborhood boys tied me and Mary Lou Mahar to Donnie Ralph's father's garage doors, spread-eagled. It was the summer they chased us almost every day. Careening across the lawns, they'd mowed for money. On bikes they threw down. They'd catch us, lie on top of us, then get up and walk away. That afternoon, Donnie's mother wasn't home. His 9 sisters and brothers gone. Even Gramps, who lived with them, gone somewhere. The backyard empty, the big house quiet. A gang of boys. They pulled the heavy garage doors down and tied us to them with clothesline. And Donnie got the deer's leg severed from the buck his dad had killed the year before, dried up and still fur-covered, and sort of poked it at us, dancing around the blacktop in his sneakers, laughing. Then somebody took it from Donnie and did it. And then somebody else, and somebody after him. Then Donnie pulled up Mary Lou's dress and held it up, and she began to cry, and I became a boy again and shouted, "Stop," and they wouldn't. Then a girl boy calling out to Charlie, my best friend's brother, who wouldn't look. "Charlie," to my brother's friend who knew me, "stop them," and he wouldn't. And then more softly, and looking directly at him, I said, "Charlie." And he said, "Stop." And they said, "What?" And he said, "Stop it." And they did, quickly untying the ropes, weirdly quiet. Mary Lou still weeping, and Charlie already gone. When I read that, I think that is violent, but it's nothing like what happens to so many people in this world. It's nothing. I was listening to Andre Dubus III. Do you all know that writer, Andre Dubus III? He's an amazing novelist. He's the son of Andre Dubus, the great short story writer and essayist. He was talking about in his memoir, Townie, his sister was gang raped in the back of a car, by a whole bunch of people. I mean, this happens to women all the time. We know the statistics. I'm sorry to go on about this, but it was terrifying to us. We were kids, and Charlie did come back to remember me and stopped and made Donnie stop. But we humans, we're not. We have a lot of violence in us. Each of us,
Mm,
not just
very,
that. Each of us.
very touching.
Lots
Sort of another very human poem, I think, and I hope we're not clicking along too many poems. Is this okay? This pace, or yeah, I'm loving it. So please keep reading. Is Star Market, which I've heard from Bostonians is actually Stair Market, is it?
No, it's Star Market. Why would they even say that? It's a star, a big star. It's going around and around. It was Cambridge. Maybe they were in Boston. But I also like the idea of there being a star market, don't you?
Yeah.
You can buy the stars. One second. Star Market. The people Jesus loved were shopping at the Star Market yesterday. An old lead-colored man standing next to me at the checkout breathed so heavily I had to step back a few steps. Even after his bags were packed, he stood still, breathing hard and hawking into his hand. The feeble, the lame, I could hardly look at them. Shuffling through the aisles, they smelled of decay, as if the Star Market had declared a day off for the able-bodied, and I had wandered in with the rest of them. Sour milk, bad meat, looking for cereal and spring water. Jesus must have been a saint, I said to myself, looking for my lost car in the parking lot later, stumbling among the people who would have been lowered into rooms by ropes, who would have crept out of caves or crawled from the corners of public baths on their hands and knees begging for mercy. If I touch only the hem of his garment, one woman thought, could I bear the look on his face when he wheels around? So
It reminded me of we've got a koan called taking the form or shape of Guan Yin, the Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion. Find shelter for the homeless people. And you, particularly early, and you knew the Berrigans, and you were very involved in almost, I don't know, radical Catholic.
as much as one can be involved at 19, 18, college, yeah, but Phil Berrigan was married to one of the nuns at Marymount College where I was going to school. And I was part of that. But that poem's not about the homeless. That poem's about me, all of us. I'm one of those people. I'm one of those people who would have, I love all those parables about, the people who are trying to get healed by Jesus and they can't get there, and people take apart the roof and lower them down, and I just love it. And to me, it brings up all of the crazy projections we project onto teachers. You guys must go through that. you know I mean, that when you have a spiritual teacher, suddenly people are like, I was first time I went to Omega to try to hear Thich Nhat Hanh. I came late and I went to the big room and nobody was there yet, but they'd all put their pillows down and there was no room. Everybody had gotten there early to put all their pillows down so they could be in front. And I totally get that, but there's this terrible kind of projection too. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm.
About I don't know. I mean, I'm sorry. It's I usually go to bed at 9 o'clock and it's almost 10 p.m. So I'm getting drifty. And I wish other people would talk. Can we hear some of you?
Yeah. I'd like to bring in John Tarrant and
Yeah,
Allison Atwill,
lovely.
and also at some point maybe we have time for Magdalene. So, but John and Allison, please. Um,
Thanks. Thanks very much. It's a grand thing letting the poems just sort of wash through me and change me. And I think maybe you gave an answer to. I've always wondered, well, what is it about poetry, and why does it change us, and what's that change, and what do we think we're doing with poems? and
Mhm.
I remember some people think like I remember asking Milosh that question, and he said he thought it was about language. Language is the only homeland. He said,
Yeah.
considering and all, I can understand that, and on but
Given where he came from and what happened.
yeah, and how many languages and different languages and the steamroll of history and all that, So, but uh, I was when I first read uh, My Dead Friends, I think, yeah, I could tell that for you, poetry was in some way enlarging the world to things that one might have thought were lost, were not, or one was still in communication with them. And I felt that with it might be a Catholic upbringing thing, but I don't think so. I felt that with my father, who improved a lot after he died, you know.
Mine did too.
and
Yeah.
and he would just turn up and I'd have a chat with him. And mainly he wanted to know about the weather, which is what he had wanted to know as he'd had a hard childhood out in the fields and things. But it wasn't that. He would just wanted to know about the state of the earth. And so I don't know. Two questions there. One is the way the dead are with us in a way that's positive, not there's that, and and what the hell is poetry for? And I don't know that it has to be for anything, but the thing that it is something we experience rather than do or make or something like that. It seems to me so.
Rilke says, right? He says poems are not merely feelings; they are one has easily enough. They're experiences. The poems I love are poems where I experience something that I wouldn't have experienced without the poem. It's
Yeah,
like a person. You can't say reduce it to like saying what it's like this or it's this. And I've been rereading Marshall McLuhan. My God, what a guy. And he's talking about hot and cold mediums and how the best poems, and I'm not saying that they're mine at all, but the poems I love are the poems that are vast and specific, but that I feel like I could read them, 1,000 times, and every time I have an experience um, that's I can't have any other place except with that poem, and it can't. It changes too, but because we participate in poems, I mean, we participate. We enter into them. We engage with them in a different way than some of well, maybe all artists like that, but yeah.
yeah, that's interesting. Like, yeah, and in some way, that I guess it's an engagement with yeah, it's like engagement with death, violence, life, kindness, all those things.
Yeah, prayer, love, wonder, longing. I mean, so many things, all at once.
Yeah, I like that. Um, I especially like the thing I just first said, that the dead are not dead so much, sort of like Joyce's world in a way, but yeah, they're not really dead, and it's not that we think that or imagine that, but we notice that, you and so I guess that's, I don't know. I'm happy feeling that and thinking that.
Me too. I love that you say that, there's a great poet, James Wright, who
Oh yeah,
wrote, and his son, Franz, was a great poet and a friend of mine for a while. And he wrote this great poem to his father. It's very small. I wish I knew the whole thing by heart, but it ends by saying, "Besides, you're not dead. I know dead people, and you are not dead."
isn't that great?
Oh, my friend Lucy is one of the Lucys in the Everybody's Dead poem that I started with. We used to look at each other and go, "Besides, I know dead people. You are not dead." And there are, yeah, there's nobody's dead. Um, and that the word remember, right, is to really remember, to remember, dash member them in a way. But I also really do believe the dead are not dead. I really do believe that. I know that, you know, aside like us holding them within us and all that, I feel like they're active. The dead are alive and busy.
Okay. Busy is good. Well, the other thing, I guess Rilke was very good on this, but there's a way in which, in the poem, a whole bunch of your poetry does this, and Milosh doesn't that much actually, but where you suddenly, the object comes forward, or first the foot comes forward, and then the universe, it opens, and the universe is there. And I don't know. I suppose that's the beginning of some kind of religion, beyond a mother singing to her baby. But it feels to me that's an important thing that is not engineering and tech doesn't really offer, or even is not sympathetic to. So I guess I keep trying to think. Well, what do we have apart from assembled objects? So so I don't know if you have anything to say about that. The way we enter. Oh, Bilka talks about that too, the coiled rope on the Nile and things like that. Yeah. But
He loved things, right? He loved the life of things. But also, I mean, much of what we know we can't see or prove.
yeah.
Isn't that, I mean, that's true for my life. The truest things I know I can't see or prove. And yet,
Oh, well, yeah, not coming to conclusions about them and explaining them, it seems to be
yeah,
sort of,
yeah.
yeah.
And yet they shake my life, they illuminate my life, they, irradiate my life, if you will. And yet these are not things that one can point to, or tries to talk about them. It's language fails.
Well, the mysterious quality is on our side, I think. So I feel, so that's what brought me to meditation. I thought, oh, this is something I don't have to understand.
That's a lovely thing to say. Did you say the mysterious quality is on our side?
Yes, yeah, I think so. Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing to say. I feel that too. And
Yeah.
I don't know why, you know. I mean, I don't know if the people suffering right now in Gaza can feel such a thing. I don't know, I have not been tested in those ways, hungry, all the unbearable things people go through in war. But I believe it too. I believe it too. Well, and people like Primo Levi would say that too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
People who
sure. Yeah,
who feel that the mysterious is somehow on our side. Yeah,
yeah.
that's a beautiful way of saying it.
Well, that's what I feel like I'd like to let some other people in. I did notice a couple of people like Frank Ostaseski, who's in the death biz, and you probably know, who's really one of the wise people about death, is here. And Susan Murphy from Sydney actually is here. And some interesting people. So, and Allison, I think, is next. So.
Well, I think the thing to say is that, you were talking about the people in Gaza or other people who are suffering terribly, that and we come into this with Zen too, where we'll have someone who's at a retreat or a student I'm working with or something who really is going through some, or our friend Naomi, who was going through terrible suffering, a lot, losing her son, is that the story isn't over yet. It's this point, it's this moment in the story, and to know that everything is lost is knowing more than we can know. We can just have this one moment, but the rest is uncertain. It's still uncertain.
Such a beautiful line too, Allison. The story isn't over yet, and of course that's it. These moments, like we think, this is it. This is it, but the story isn't over, and the story goes backwards and forwards and all around too. It's not linear. John used to say all the time, Marie, it's not linear. It's circular. It's circular. It's not linear. One of the things he said before, when he was in the last weeks of his life, he looked up at me and he goes, Mare, this is not a tragedy. I'm a happy man.
That's it.
And he said, when I'm asked if I could love, I can answer yes.
Yeah.
This is not marriage. This is not a tragedy. I'm a happy man. And so there, that to me, that just speaks to what you're both saying, really,
I was very struck by something, a line from one of the poems where I think you're speaking to your brother and it's a conversation between you two. And he says to you, you know this already. Was that from a poem or just a conversation?
It's when I would read him a poem, I thought maybe it was a poem. And he would listen and it would just be silence on the other end of the phone. And I would go, what? And he would go, no. And I go, why? And he'd go, do you know this already? And I'm like, the birds. And he goes, the birds are nice. But you know this already. And that was like, damn, you're right. Thank you. Goodbye. Love you. And I'm just back to the typewriter. But the thing is, he was right. I mean, and he could discern it and know it. Now I can say that to my students too, many of them. But I didn't know then. I wanted it to be something I didn't know. But that's the problem, writing what you think, that's what we were talking about earlier, what John was saying, it's like, it's not that I have something to say. I've got nothing to say.
Yeah, I was very struck with the similarity with Zen, where it's not that there's some quality of being, the deepest quality of being inside of us that's underneath all our ambitions or even underneath our confusion. And your brother was speaking directly to that place that's before all that or underneath all that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he lived with a guy who was a Zen practitioner, Joe. So he took in a lot from Joe. John didn't practice, but John was just like that. He was like that when he was a boy, too. I mean, if he were here, he would be arguing with me a little. But,
and I guess two more things. I don't want to take up all your time, but one, I come from also, as you know, family of 9 kids, and all of us are still alive, even though we're getting quite old now. And you would think that, but I often imagine, like, what would it be like? What will it be like when one of us is gone? And I almost get the image of like a constellation losing one of its stars. Like,
yeah.
stars going dark or something. Could you
Yeah.
speak to that? What it feels like?
Well, our family, different people relate to different things. And, we were separated by the disease of alcoholism, which is a kind of cluster bomb. And I love my parents, my father. I mean, he's so much happier now. We were talking earlier about, because he's so,
My parents too are much happier now. They're gone.
yeah, and he's sober. He wanted to be sober his whole life, So I listen to him a lot now, and I loved him in life as well. But it can separate people because everyone is hit with different shrapnel in different times, and so some of that's happened in my siblings among us. But and when Johnny died, it was everybody's hearts were broken. I mean, it was just so hard, and also all his friends died. I mean, people were just dying. And it was back in the day when people still had all these misinformation about AIDS, and nurses wouldn't touch him. And, we didn't know what, so it was part of all that too. And that, thank God, is past, and moving away. But I forgot what I was saying, what you were saying, Allison. Say it again. Oh, about the star. Well, it's different. Yeah. Yeah. Some of us are close. Some of us are more separated.
Yes, I have the same. I have some siblings I will not speak to. But in some way, I'm still, they're still.
I love them, every one of them, forever, period. That's it. No argument, nothing. I don't care. But I'm not one of the youngest. We had different families.
Yes, every child in a family of 9 is a different family they grew up in.
I feel like we keep drifting off into these personal things, you guys. I'm sorry. We should maybe.
I think that's what makes a conversation interesting.
Okay, I don't want to.
I think it's fabulous. Susan Murphy from Sydney, Australia is on. And I don't know, Susan, if you'd like to ask a question or two.
Thanks, John. Look, I really want to say I'm jealous of not having 9 siblings suddenly, because I love my siblings deeply, but I've only got 2 and I've lost 1. And I can't help but resonate with 2 things, actually. I mean, I love your work, Marie. I just think it speaks directly to any human being, but especially anybody who's stopped to not know and to actually value not knowing, because that's at the root of so much of what you write, without mentioning it most of the time. And that's the most valuable thing about it, probably. All poetry is coming from that point of not knowing, I'd say. And that's why it's so strong, that's why it's so inarguable at a certain level, when the experience it carries is there. But 2 things. One of them is that I think what I hear in your poetry is connection to your childhood that is undimmed. It's just natural. It's just naturally continuous with what you are now and how you are now. There's a writer, a lovely Australian writer here, who once described this as the childhood gland. Mm-hmm. She said, if you have close siblings of any kind, or are close to your siblings, you then have this childhood gland that goes on spurting out those memories. And so when you're together, you go back to that place where everything is alive again, just like a dream never quite dies. A dream you've had, a great dream, you can walk back into it, and you can walk back into the childhood feeling that you shared. It can't go away. And I'd say that's a deeply endearing thing about your work for me. It's like it kind of confirms that, that childhood energy, it's something that wakes up in Zen. Everyone talks, so many people talk about after a deep Zen session, they're back there. They're back there in that kind of freedom of seeing directly, of paying attention, of being astonished, and being able to sort of be able to say one or two things about that at last, you know. That feels to me like one of the great gifts of your poetry. And the other one is your preparedness to be with death. And it's been a big part of this conversation that I've really relished, because to be able to be with it and not draw back from it, I mean, isn't it the live point? And isn't it the place that connects beyond time and space? You know, I totally agree. The dead are alive in ways that cross over from time to time. And they cross over because we're alive to them.
That's lovely. I wish we could write all these lines down and put them together. And it's so beautiful. I loved hearing you, Susan. I love your face. I was looking at your face earlier. You're in my top corner here, and it's just such a beautiful open face. It's really a great pleasure to look at you and gaze at you, or meet your gaze, I should say. I'm not objectifying you. I mean, I feel, yeah, well, you know, we live in the fullness of time, right? And I feel as if poetry, or when John was saying, this is not a tragedy, I'm a happy man, there's a way that time and eternity have an intersection. And I feel like that's the intersection that poetry can live in, and that we can live in. You know, like
yeah. It might even be the only place we live, actually.
Yeah, really. Yeah. There's this new little poem in the new ones where the character, the sort of me character, is with her daughter in this diner and saying, I'm worried about Jason. And she says, put Jason take it out of your mind, but don't take Jason. And she's the wisdom person in the book, or that, you know, and this notion of living in the now, and how the character in the poem finds it very constricting to be in the now sometimes. But the girl doesn't. So it's funny. She's a kind of the hero of the poem.
That's beautiful.
Happily eating her meatballs for breakfast. So
yeah.
You're in Australia.
Yeah, I am. So it's actually not remote from John, who's also Australian, even whatever else he might be by now.
He told me, I learned this about him almost immediately. And the wombat.
You do need to know about wombats. It's important. They're not as well known as they should be. There's also numbats, by the way. There's all sorts of...
You didn't tell me that, John. Yeah. You neglected that part.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Marie. It's fantastic to
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great to meet you too, Susan. I hope we meet in person one day.
So do I. So do I.
So, Chats, I've listened to you at the FAWC for years.
Oh, who
and
is
I knew Lucy as well. And I'm also studying with Koshin and Chodo. Adam Moss's interview was great. I would love to ask you about Silence from Susan Pollock, who's a good friend of ours.
Susan Pollock. Mm-hmm.
Hi, and I think I've probably been listening to you at Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown for, I don't know, 20 years, over 20 years. And my daughter would come along and just be enraptured. Yeah, I know. And I watched your daughter grow. And one of the things in Adam Moss's wonderful interview was that sense of you going deeply into silence. And then in Open Temple today, we all read, at least in the East Coast one, what the silence says, which I thought was just riveting. So I wanted to ask you, because I know you study with Chodo and Koshin, what role meditation plays for you?
Yeah. Okay.
Right out of the silence.
I have to come, Susan, you have to know this about me. I don't really study with those guys. I do anything they ask me to do, anything. So I'll go and I'll work with people writing and all that stuff, but I'm the worst meditator you've ever known. I mean, I don't silence. I am agitated. I'm too busy. I have too many, like everybody, so many emails. I can hardly sit still. So the silence to me it's the everything that I need to pay attention to, and it's very difficult for me to do it. I can't emphasize that enough. And so that little poem, Silence says, I know you think you already know, but wait. So I wasn't writing, and it doesn't, but it's not like I'm sitting in some silent meditation, waiting to hear something. If I had been doing that, perhaps much more could have come of it, but I'm the most distracted person. It's
There you go.
it's the truth.
I want to say we kind of like that. And
Thank you.
There's a Tibetan saying of don't raise delusive thoughts. If you do have delusive thoughts, don't try to get rid of them. If you're distracted,
The word you're saying, John, is delusive.
yeah, in other words, if you're distracted, don't try to stop that either. So
Yeah, but that assumes someone's actually sitting in meditation, being distracted.
no, you're wandering about, you're doing what, cooking or whatever, thinking your mind, thinking you should be writing a better poem or whatever you're thinking.
I try everything, it's like a nervous system thing, it's taken my body a long time just to quiet down. Yeah, silence holds it all. And when I'm able to, sometimes that actually came by me just sitting at the desk, though, not on a pillow, but not to meditate, but writing is kind of meditation, and just listening. And what it said was, I know you think you already know, but wait. Longer than that. Even longer than that. Yeah. What the silence said. Yeah.
That's great.
So I don't see any further chat, so maybe we'll wind it up. Poet's Choice. Magdalene and the Seven Devils, or Hurry, which is such a cute poem. It's one of my favorite poems of yours.
Well, this speaks actually to what Susan was saying. And Susan, next time we're at the Fine Arts Work Center, let's greet each other.
I'll be there in August as usual.
Okay, let's do that. It'd be really fun because that place means so much to both of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's do that. So this is a little poem. This poem, I wrote it to a friend in an email, and he wrote back and said, this might be a poem. I'm like, nah. And he goes, just separate it out, just type it up. So I don't know what, but again, the two heroes of this, there are a couple of heroes throughout these poems. James, the guy I was with for a while, he's one of the heroes in some ways, but also my daughter and my dog, they know a lot more than I do about just about everything. But here's her poem called Hurry. She was very little. I adopted her from China when I was 52 and she was 2.5. So, she's a hero. Hurry. We stop at the dry cleaners and the grocery store and the gas station and the green market, and hurry up, honey. I say, hurry. As she runs along 2 or 3 steps behind me, her blue jacket unzipped and her socks rolled down. Where do I want her to hurry to? To her grave? To mine? Where one day she might stand all grown? Today, when all the errands are finally done, I say to her, honey, I'm sorry I keep saying hurry. You walk ahead of me. You be the mother. And hurry up, she says over her shoulder. looking back at me, laughing. Hurry up now, darling, she says. Hurry, hurry, taking the house keys from my hands. Story of my life.
That's great.
Yeah. Well, I just want to thank you so much, all of you. John, thank you so much. And thank you, Allison. Thank you, the other John. Thank you, Susan. Thank you all of your beautiful faces I see and can see. I wish we could all be in the same room together. That would be really
That'd be lovely.
wonderful.
Maybe we will someday. Yeah.
Be great. Thank
So
you for
thank you so much, Marie, for staying up late for us. It's just been tremendous and lovely, and we love your poetry and what you're doing and your stories. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody.